Because I didn't cooperate with the training, we only ended up sparring. After hearing that, instead of working harder, I became lazy. The prince says to the instructor, Bernard, from today, teach me with all your heart. I, Yuri Briel, will come to you with all my strength. The instructor says, I don't know what's on your mind, Your Highness, but I understood you. From this moment on, we will begin your real training. The instructor trains him with all his might. The prince thinks to himself, I forgot Bernard's title, the demon sword, before he came to Briel. After training, the prince falls to the ground exhausted. He thinks to himself, so this is what fighting with Bernard is like. If it weren't for my experience as a mercenary, I would have been severely beaten without any resistance. Nevertheless, this is training. If I continue at this pace, I will undoubtedly improve. The instructor thinks to himself, he stopped all my attacks. When did His Highness improve to this extent? While he is lying on the ground, the maid Hannah comes and says, Your Highness, you must stop and come with me. His Majesty requests your presence. The prince says, His Majesty? Why? The maid says Count Johannes brought his daughter here. The prince thinks to himself, the son of the traitor Count Johannes, who stabbed us in the back and opened the gate to the empire in my previous life. Gat Barbar, that bastard is here. The prince says, Hannah, where is that despicable scoundrel now? The third prince, the other princes, the king, the count, and his son appear at the dining table. The count says, Third prince, you seem different now. You've gained some weight too. The king says, I think my son might have taken the wrong medicine, or something like that. The count says, if that's the case, I want my son to take one too. Your son is already very clever. One of the princes asks the third prince, what's wrong? Are you having trouble with him? The prince says, yes, I have. He stabbed me in the back. The eldest prince says, so what will you do about this, invincible Yuri Briel? The eldest prince thinks to himself, he acts refined on the outside, yet he's preoccupied with trying to keep up with others. He hasn't changed completely. The third prince thinks to himself, I won't do anything. I must control my temper. All of this is for your benefit. Got. This life cannot follow the same path as my previous one. Thinking about it, I almost fought God around this time. It was completely one-sided. Did he choose betrayal because he was already resentful from that day? The scene shifts to the dueling arena. The prince says, well, Got, I heard you're skilled with the sword. Got says, I only know a little. The third prince says, shut up. The kingdom doesn't need weak-minded knights. Got says, I'm not even a formal knight. The third prince says to him, didn't you become a knight serving the country recently? Got says, yes. Third prince. The prince says, then let's duel. The third prince attacks him harshly several times. Got says, Prince, please act like a knight. The third prince throws his weapon and attacks Got, kicking him until he falls to the ground. The third prince takes the wooden sword and says, Got Bachev. He thinks to himself, in your previous life, you used your father's authority to sell information to the empire. He says to Got, your father was amazing and a respected knight. Why do you think we use these titles? What's their purpose? The prince thinks to himself, I know you only wanted to succeed. This time, stand tall and Briel. The prince helps him up and says, are these questions so difficult for you? Got says, yes, I don't understand what you mean. The third prince thinks to himself, I won't allow any knight to think this way. Not even me. The prince says, how about this? Why is your father a count? And who gave him that title? Try to understand the nature of the situation from now on, and think about what I just said. Do you understand? After that, Got leaves. Then the eldest prince appears and says, that was invigorating. You're really good at dueling. The third prince says, do you think I would lose? The eldest prince says, yes. The third prince asks him, brother, what am I to you? The eldest prince says, the worst troublemaker and gambler ever found in this kingdom. The third prince says, I'm not like that anymore, and you should stop causing trouble too. Then the story moves to sunset. The prince appears, having finished his training. The trainer says, well done, prince. Let's stop here today. I think you're ready to learn the mana method. The prince asks the trainer, will you teach me your method? The trainer says, "No, mine isn't good enough for your ability. You should learn the Braille method. It's an amazing method, and it's very pure and effective." The prince thinks to himself, "I learned the Braille method in my previous life. I mastered it as a mercenary." The trainer says, "Are you thinking of learning another method?" The prince says, "I'm thinking." Then something is mentioned, and he says, "Bernard, recommend one of the gifted guards based on their latent abilities, not their skills." The prince thinks to himself, "There was a technique I couldn't even try to learn in my previous life." The trainer thinks and says, "Latent abilities? If we're only talking about latent abilities, then Gerald is the chosen one." The prince says, "Gerald?" The trainer tells him, "If we're talking about his latent abilities." The prince thinks to himself, "Before my level dropped, I met him near the end of the war. His skills were not bad. It was surprising how he held out all that time with only that level of skill. His latent ability was certainly unique, but I didn't hone his skill. Once the war began, we were both useless." The prince says, "Okay then, we should go meet that lazy knight." After that, they go to meet that knight. The prince thinks to himself, "I will guide him." A knight says to the third princess, "My lord prince, what brings you here?" The prince replies, "I came to check on how things are going here." The knight says, "We may not be up to your grace's standard, but we are all doing our best." The prince looks at the soldiers as they train, and thinks to himself, "Indeed, everyone seems very motivated." The prince then asks, "Where is Jared?" The knight points, "The new recruit. Over there, that young man." The prince looks at him and thinks to himself, "Now understand what Bernard meant. The purpose of training is to push your own limits." But he was barely doing enough to pass. He says, "He's lazy and his performance is suffering. Sir Rosso, bring me a wooden sword. I think I'll spar myself." The knight replies, "Yes, my lord. Who will be your opponent in the spar?" The third prince says, "That lazy one over there." The prince prepares for the spar. He says, "Lord Jared, I heard you are very talented. Show me what truly makes you a knight. Will you?" Jared replies, "All right, as you wish." They begin to spar. The knights observe from above, saying, as expected of Jared, "His movements are perfectly clean. Your grace will surely win." One of the knights says, "The prince is skilled, isn't he?" Another knight replies, "No, there's something strange. The distance? It's very consistent with every move." The third prince thinks to himself, "At this moment, I feel like he's matching my pace." The prince says, "This is just a demonstration, nothing more. Let's begin the real fight now." He attacks him, but the attack is parried. He thinks he blocked it. His reaction speed is monstrous as expected. He thinks to himself, "Damn it, it's useless, it seems. Even with my memories from my previous life, Jared remains a fully trained knight. I didn't think I'd win, but even so, must land at least one blow on him." The prince delivers a decisive blow to Jared and says, "That's how it should be." The prince then says to the knight, "You're not trying to let me win on purpose, are you?" Jared thinks to himself, "There's something suspicious. I'm the one attacking, yet I feel like I'm the one being cornered." Jared then uses a monosword and tries to attack the third prince. Lebrel, the observing knights from above exclaim, "Has he lost his mind? He's using a monosword." They shout at him, "That's the third prince you're fighting. Wake up!" But he continues to attack the prince. The prince dodges the attack and is unharmed. But the mana-covered sword cuts the prince's hair. The knights scream, "That madman tried to attack the prince." "Third prince, are you all right?" The third prince replies, "I'm fine." "Is this your first time sparring with someone, Jared? Pick up your sword now. This is starting to get fun. There's no reason to stop." They begin sparring with mana swords. Jared thinks to himself, "This prince is different from him. He pushes himself to his limits. Even beyond those limits, he pushes himself to the breaking point."